Hi, everybody, and thanks to everyone who's taken part in that. Just so much experience there, isn't there, to learn from. It's fantastic, really fantastic. Um, Danielle's going to come back right at the end, just for a few minutes to signpost us onto other things beyond this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again. Let's see if I can achieve that. I think I can. Yes. Right, there you go. Um, Great. Okay. So hopefully you can see that. Yes, reimagine the church and the post-COVID world. That's what we've been talking about all the way through. It's preparing us for this thing. But of course, the point is this, isn't it, really, that as we're saying in all sorts of different contexts, COVID hasn't created a situation, it's highlighted a situation. It's shown us what was already there. When we talk about leveling up, it's not as though there was a level playing field for everyone before COVID, which has suddenly been eradicated. It's that there was never a level playing field. Justice was always an issue. Justice is, of course, what love looks like in practice. So as we work out our love for others, God is love. That looks like justice. That is justice. That's what we're about. So what I'd like to do is just pick up some themes that I'd written down for how I've seen the development of this work over these last 35, 36 years, lessons I've learned from my own mistakes, lessons I've learned, and there's lots of those, lessons I've learned from the wisdom of others, and things that I can remember as well. So I put these together. Now, some of that they were kind of put down before the last question and answer session. So they'll chime in with them, I hope, in some places. And because I can't remember all the slides, if they're exactly the same as them, we just skip them and move on. The first one is about partnership, about working in partnership. A lot of churches, I've been a church leader for a long time, and charities have a survival mentality, which means they're always competitive with everyone else. That is an awful killer. I know how it happens, and think I know why it happens. And if we had more time, I'd explain some of my experiences of it, because I know I've been guilty of it as well. But in actual fact, partnership really works. But there are some specific things to say about partnership. I'd like to show you some of our logos that don't look very partner at all to start with. This is the logo for Oasis Church Waterloo. We have a very similar one for Oasis Church Bath, except that it says Bath and not Waterloo. That's the logo. This is the logo for our Debt Advice Centre here. This is the logo for the primary school that we run in Waterloo, Oasis Academy Johanna. This is the logo for the secondary academy we run, Oasis Academy South Bank. So they're all very similar and all very much Oasis, our Messio, and Oasis at the heart of them. But here's something that we run in Waterloo, the farm I was talking about earlier, which we run with Jamie's farm. Jamie's farm is a proper farm. In fact, Jamie runs several farms now, but when we began working with them, they ran one huge, big farm. And we have a little farm. So we developed a partnership with them. And so we have some sheep and some goats sometimes and some pigs and that come and then they come to us and spend some time with us and then go back. But we've developed a whole approach to what we call farming therapy. That's education for children who just need some peace in their lives, out of a classroom and out of a crowd. Together, we've done this together. So this is the logo that's on the farm just around the corner from where I sit, from where I'm standing. And then, when I was talking about working in Waterloo, I said that our goal was to begin, once I got all the buildings together. I forget who said about, you've got to deal with all the admin and all the difficult stuff. Well, when I came to Waterloo, it took me from 2003 to 2010 to deal with all the difficult stuff. But in 2010, we set out those goals and began to work more widely, and we established something called South Bank Churches, um, which I chaired for a long time, and we staffed and we did the administration for that as well. That's grown now, and we don't do that anymore. We're part of this, but not having to staff it, as it were. And South Bank Churches, we designed that logo, and that is the logo of South Bank Churches. But there's no reference to Oasis. Oasis is part of it, but there's no reference to us. And the Waterloo Food Bank that Rebecca's talked about and Rebecca's responsible for, this is its logo. There's no reference to Oasis in it at all. But in fact, Oasis, working with more partners than I know, and I don't think Rebecca said, but lots and lots of partners, tens and tens, hundreds, more than 100 probably in different ways. Well, in fact, sure, more than 100. This is the Waterloo Food Bank. There's no reference to Oasis in that. So what I'm really saying is that once you've established who you are, you can then work with others. So the reason that the church and the academies that we run have a very clear Oasis branding is to create connection for people. It's not about power or empire, as people often suspect, sadly. It's about when you're if you're sending your child to a school, it's connected to the church, and the church is connected to that. And it's the same values and it's the same ethos, and I can trust them. But then you go on to do other things that work with others. Here is the Park Plaza Hotel, which is up the road from us. And this is a bunch of people who work for the hotel. And on one end, the left-hand end, Roe, who has retired now, but worked until very recently for us here as part of the church in Waterloo. And in front of them is a whole pile of bed linen. This is the bed linen. We approached Park Plaza Hotel. I got to know the boss and I asked if we could work together. They said, yeah, you can have all our old bed linen. Well, actually, what we want is cash, isn't it? Not bed linen. But in reality, we took the bed linen. And what we did, Ro worked this out, not me, we discovered, we found that, of course, you can sell the bed linen and it can be reused, and we got a price for that. And we took as much bed linen, lots and lots of it, as we could get, and we turned it into cash, and we put that cash into the food bank that we run. But in the process of doing that, we built a great partnership. And actually, Daniel, who's the boss of the Park Plaza Hotel, a couple of years ago, perhaps 3 years or 4 years ago, no, 3 years ago, I sat and had coffee with him, and they now give to us each year, they give each one of our students from our secondary school who's staying on to our sixth form a token so that they can go and buy a business suit. So our sixth form kids don't wear school uniform, they wear business wear, male and female, and the Park Plaza pay for it. And then at the end of the first lockdown, as we opened up it last summer a bit and we ran summer activities in our schools, I talked to Daniel and they made their kitchens available to us. No one's staying in the hotel at the moment. And we worked with another charity called Chefs in Schools, and we cooked loads of meals. And we not only provide these, thousands of meals through the summer. Not only did we do that, but we deepened our relationship with Park Plaza and we deepened our relationship with Chefs in Schools. Partnership really matters. In fact, in Waterloo, I just tried to think of, for this, some of the groups that we work with, Lambeth Council and Facebook and Barclays, and et cetera, et cetera. That's just a selection of those charities that we work with in various ways, in different ways. Partnership. Establishing yourself is important, and your brand, your logo, and what it stands for. So much to say about brands and logos. And then working with others is important. You don't lose anything, you gain so much through that confidence. I'd like to talk about funding. Of course, Rebecca and Nathan and others were beginning to talk about this. You cannot fund this work out of the traditional way of funding church work, which is the offertory plate and standing orders. You just can't do it. And so what the team were beginning to explore just a little bit is some of those other funding routes. And here I talk about what I call the new civic settlement. It's well understood that we can't get to where we want to go and level up, the phraseology for all this right now, unless we work in partnership. We've got to be ready to work in partnership. But that also adds up new funding avenues as well. Oasis is constantly, I think Rebecca referred to this, someone did, we're constantly putting in funding bids. We write tons of funding bids. I spend lots of my time writing funding bids. And you might think, well, Steve's now kind of like the head of this thing. There's someone else there to write the funding bids. There are lots of people writing funding bids, but I do my fair share of them and work at them all the time. I've worked on them this week. I'll work on them next week. There's so much to do the whole time. And 50% of the time, I made that figure up. I don't know if it's actually 50%. We get let down and we think we've got money and it doesn't come up. And we think we've won something and it doesn't happen. And then just this week, I was hoping that we'd win something. And then they wrote and said they put the whole process back. So we still don't know. So they tell us we might hear next week. Perhaps we will, perhaps we won't, and perhaps it will work out and perhaps it won't. So it's dusting yourself off and getting on. It's driven by this vision of building Christ-centered communities that matters more than anything. But you can't run schools through an offertory plate, can you? So in Waterloo, and I'm only talking about Waterloo because I could talk about, and I will in a minute, talk about what we do in some of the other hubs that I'm involved in. I'm clearly not involved in them all or even most of them. But here in Waterloo, money that comes through the church gives fantastically. It's wonderful. It really is wonderful. If you give a church a reason to give, they give more than if you're just saying slot your money into the offertory plate because it keeps the whole show on the road. Give people things to hope for. When you develop a church, I'm sure you have to have peaks and troughs. You need to have a target to aim at, and it needs to be hard work because vision drives people forward. And then when they hit it, let it go mellow for a little bit, but not for too long. You need to set another target so you're moving forward like that. If people get bored because just like you, they don't want to sit around forever reciting prayers and singing hymns. But if they're involved in the mission, then actually praying the prayers and singing the songs of this mission and this battle have new depth and meaning. But there are other ways of funding. So the local library is funded in partnership with the local authority. The farm that I talked about is funded, well, because we're given peppercorn rent. In other words, we pay absolutely nothing to look after this piece of land for the while. The coffee house is in many ways social enterprising, i.e. people come in when they're allowed to, of course, and pay for their coffee. The schools are funded by central government. With the refugee housing that we set up, we bought through basically, which was a share system. So we talked to people who wanted to invest. It's about investment. And we said, will you buy a slice or purchase a slice, invest in this house for a period of 5 years when you can either opt out or you can renew. So that was a different way of doing things then. We work in partnership with businesses, as I've explained, who give to us all sorts of things as we give something back to them. This is a new civic settlement. We talk to government. I'm talking to government about housing, about education, about the justice system, all of those things at the moment. And they're long. It takes a long time. I'd like to say something about capacity. I should say about the funding thing. Well, I'll come back to that in a moment. Capacity. It's been said several times. Start with low-hanging fruit. When I came to work in this church building here, we didn't own this part of it. That was part of the 8 years of work to get all this back. So I stood in a church where the lights didn't work, the toilets didn't work, the roof leaked, and it was shut for the whole week, except on Sunday morning. So what was the thing to do? Open, as I said earlier, a coffee afternoon, Tuesday afternoons, because low skills, big impact, low hanging fruit, easy to do. And then mums began to come in. And as they came in with their toddlers, we let them run around inside. They began to tell us that this was great because they had nowhere to go to be with their children. So the next thing we started was a play and stay. It turned into something we call hullabaloo. It's easier than a nursery because there's no Ofsted, etc., because the parents were staying with their children and responsible for them. But as we ran that on one morning of the week, we began to run it on 2 mornings of the week. And then the coffee house began to develop. And we ran, I can't remember now, we found the volunteers, etc., to run 2 days a week, and then 3 days a week, and then Monday to Friday, and then Monday to Saturday, etc., and began to employ people. And the business grew. Start small. Don't overreach yourself, but start. Relationships. Well, I won't say much about that. Be there. I think Nathan actually said that. It's all about relationships. And as Nathan said, it's been one of the hallmarks of my life. People do say, oh, Steve, you're a bit of a lucky blighter. Actually, you wouldn't believe how many times I think that people within Oasis think that. But the truth is, I'm constantly investing in relationships all of the time, constantly building networks all of the time, often disappointed. So many things I invest in just don't happen. And I want to talk about my use of the word I in a moment, but save that for later. So it's being there, investing, like Nate said, or Rebecca said, it's sitting in the most boring meetings. I sat through a meeting this week. I mean, I tell you, it went on for 2 hours, nearly 2 hours. And it was probably the most pointless meeting I've sat in during lockdowns. It was, tedious isn't the word. It made tedious look exciting. But being there is really important. And then you ask some questions in the chat, etc. And even in that situation, it leads on to other things. Be there. In biblical terms, this is called incarnation. And here is a picture, again, that picture I showed you of Waterloo. Why am I showing it to you again? Because these things are just things that we run. But the things that we run, the spaces that we've got, create activity, and the activity creates relationships. This looks like a map of stuff, real estate, or things that we hire or are able to use or own or whatever it might be. But it's really a map of activities. And it's really a map beyond being a map of activities, a map of relationships. This creates endless opportunities for relationships. And relationships is how you work to make things happen. I'd like to say a little bit about context, urban versus rural, because, and again, well, actually, I'll put this slide in because we ran this conference, as you probably know, once last month, and this question was asked. And so I put this in. A little bit has been said about it this morning. I actually work in a very rural context. I know it doesn't look like that, looking that way in Waterloo, but I'm most involved in 3 Oasis locations, I think. Here in Waterloo, where I live and work alongside Nathan, Rebecca and Danielle and a whole host of others now. But on the Isle of Sheppey, the Isle of Sheppey is in the Thames estuary. It's near Medway, and it's very rural and very poor, very poor. And I work there, and in Bristol. I think I'm very much involved in what we do in Bristol, one way or the other. But let me show you this picture, which I hope is the next one. Yeah. So I had this idea, which I talked to Rebecca about for Waterloo as well. But some things work in rural situations better than in urban situations. Waterloo is inside the congestion zone, which makes it hard. But my idea was simply this, that you'd get a bus and you'd refit the bus, and downstairs you'd turn it into a community supermarket, a bit like a food pantry. I don't know if you know what that expression's about. I'll talk about that in a moment. And then upstairs you'd create places where people could sit and chat and talk, debt advice, employment advice, mental health advice, youth work, etc. And then in the summer, outside, you can make all sorts of stuff happen inside and outside. Well, I think I talked to Rebecca about the idea, but because I'm very much involved with what we do on the Isle of Sheppey, we have set up a community forum, and I played that idea in there with them too, and things progress because it's a rural situation. Because it's rural, there's no congestion charge, and then because of the forum that I developed about 2.5 years ago, talking to the community, the guy that runs the bus company on the island, it's called Travel Masters, gets involved with the forum. So I had a little word with him this year, actually, beginning this year. And I said, look, any chance that you could supply us a bus? You know, we'll pay for it, but can you supply us a bus? So he said, oh, leave it to me to think about. I said, but if you supply us a bus, the real problem, I said, we've run buses before in different places I have. The real problem is, where do you garage them? Where do you MOT them? And where do you MOT them? And where do you service them? And we can't afford that. He said, leave it to me, I'll think about it. He came back and said, it took some while. He came back and he said to me some weeks ago now, he said, we bought a bus. We didn't buy you any old bus. We bought you a bus that we're using. We'll garage it, we'll service it, we'll keep it, we'll run it. And by the way, we bought it. It's our gift to you. And we talked to some fitters out, and they'll do this work for you. So there you are, something that can work in a rural setting but can't work here. And what is a food pantry? Of course, one of the problems with food banks, as Rebecca would say if she was talking right now, is the stigma involved in a food bank. I have to come and ask for food. So a food pantry, this community mobile supermarket, which will go to 6 different venues around the island, 6 different little villages basically around the island on 6 different days. The idea is that everybody pays a membership fee of £5 a month, we're thinking, because we're planning to launch this in a couple of months, not launched yet. Pays a membership fee, £5 a month. But we done a deal with we've done a deal with Morrison's, actually, plus a big charity called Fair Share. So all the food comes free, but the people come, it comes to them, and they come and buy it, and they pay, and they think, wow, this is a great community supermarket. I pay £5 a month, but I get £40 worth of food. It's fantastic. Takes the stigma out of it. Don't want to get stuck in it. And that leads me on to say this: strategy versus opportunism. We all need strategies, long-term strategies, not just for what we do this summer or post-COVID, but a 10-year strategy. Where do we want to get to? That's what we encaptured in that poem. Poetry works well. It creates flexibility, but it gives you direction. But you've got to balance that always with opportunism. What comes along? What falls into your lap? Those two things have to go together. And when a strategy is in place that crushes an opportunity, you're looking at a dead organization. It's just going to take sometimes generations to do the dying. I don't have time because we're running on to explore the detail. There's this bit of educationalism, David Klove's learning cycle. It's, some of you who are in education, you know about this. How do we learn? One, we have an experience, all of us, even the most reflective person. Well, how did you learn in life first? You know, as a baby, you cry, or you touch something that's hot and you get burnt and you don't do it again. You cry and you realize you get your mother's attention or whatever it is. You have an experience. You reflect on that experience, stage 2. You conclude from that experience, and then you act differently as a result of that experience. That is how everyone on the planet learns. So Peter Honey and Alan Mumford, two other very famous educationists, they took hold of this work really, and they said, look, they said there are different ways in which we learn naturally. We're activists, or we could be reflectivists, or theorists, or pragmatists. You might be a very theoretical person, a very reflective person who likes to think it all through and doesn't like to go too fast. And you look at activists and you think they're a bunch of nutters, someone slow them down. Or you might be an activist and you think those are reflectors, oh my life, they never get anything done. So Peter Honey and Alan Mumford took hold of David Kloeb's learning cycle and produced this. In stage one in life is always that we have an experience. Activists learn best at that stage. Then we reflect. Reflectors learn best here. You can see how it fits together. We conclude from the experience. Theorists learn there. We act differently. Pragmatists learn there. But what this is saying to us is we all need to learn to work outside of our comfort zone as well as in it. If you're an activist, don't just keep having the same experience and never learning from it. Reflect. If you reflect, get on and have an experience, and then your reflecting will be richer and deeper. And that leads us to individual or communal. We, not me. It's about us, all of us. You've seen a little team from Oasis. It's about we, not me, nor even, I've written us, because us can be our church, my group, rather than listening to others and creating, Danielle talked about this, real agency, real empowerment. It's not about us in here, it's about the big we together, not just about me. There's always a tension between pioneers and settlers, movements and institutions, as I put it. I'm a bit of a pioneer, so actually, sometimes I can be frustrated with those who want to settle because they want to settle where they are. I want to push on. Settlers need pioneers to push on and win new ground. Pioneers need settlers to just set that new ground out and create all of the infrastructure that's needed. People who are movement people who push on need the institution to embed the new ground that they win, the new goods that they win. But institutions need to respect the movement people, because if movement people will blow everything up if left to themselves, institutional people would just grind it to death and close it down slowly. Let's shut that, because if we shut that, we reduce our risk. And now let's close that and let's remodel this, but a bit smaller. So there is a tension built into this, but we, not I, we need one another. I'm not going to talk about governance and succession because it's 1 o'clock and I want to hand back to Danielle before you all rush off. But that's about we as well, isn't it? And there's so much to say about that. I'm not even going to begin, but I need to know for me that when I snuff it, I've left behind a movement, not just something based around me. And so this brings us all back to where we started as I close. Our beliefs, what we believe at core, comes out in our behaviors. What I believe about my role will come out in my behaviors. What we believe about the mission of the church and what the church is will come out in the mission of others. So one closing statement from me. There's room, of course, for everyone. Let me tell you a story. When we didn't run any schools at all, I had a dream of doing this. I went to a town council meeting. I had to speak at it. I was on the stage and there was a huge audience there. I was used to these things a decade and a half ago, and people were shouting at me, you Bible basher, we don't want one of your schools here. It was a failing school. We don't want you taking on our school. We don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want that. And it wasn't going very well, I have to tell you that. Like a job, I was on a stage, several hundred people there. And then near the end, when it was going very badly wrong, it's been run by the council, an elderly vicar stood up in the audience, and it was obvious he had their respect. And he had a brown paper bag, and he held up this brown paper bag, and out of the bag, he took a book that I'd just written. It's called The Lost Message of Jesus. And he simply said this man is not the man you think he is. This man is an inclusive man. This man isn't a fundamentalist. This man has not come to condemn you. This man has come to work with you. And on that, we won 2 schools, our second and third school. And with that, the movement of schools took off. Theology makes a big difference. Thank you. Back to Danielle.
Thanks, Steve, and thank you everybody who's taken part this morning, both our panelists and you for submitting questions and comments throughout. I hope it's been helpful, and I hope that we'll get a chance to do this maybe in person and face to face sometime before too long. There are a couple of things just to remind you of. So we will be emailing you after the event, and there'll be an option in that just to sign up to our mailing list if you're not on it already, or you can do that on the Oasis website, which is oasisuk.org. And that's so that you can hear from us about any future events like this one, or stay in touch with what Oasis is doing. If you want to contact us individually, there's a contact function on the website, or try one of our Facebook pages. One of us will see the message and get back to you. So do stay involved. We hope this is the beginning of a conversation, not just a one-off event. You'll also find on our website in the shop some of the theology resources that we've referred to this morning. So Steve's book, The Lost Message of Paul, and also a small group series that we did to go along with that, which if you are in a position where you'd like to expand this conversation in your own setting and talk to others, and do that job of making the journey together with a group of people, then have a look at both at Being Human and The Lost Message of Paul. Some of the group resources might be a way to invite others from your church and your community into that conversation. But thank you once again for joining us. And I think we are just about 4 minutes over, so thank you for your patience. But have a lovely Saturday. It's sunny here. I hope it might be sunny where you are. Have a good day, a good weekend, and we hope that we will see you again at another event. Thanks for being here.